Royal Guard reacts instantly. SAVES Prince George from a dangerous speeding car incident. The morning started like many others for Sergeant Daniel Hayes, but he never treated any day as normal. He woke up before his alarm, as he often did, and lay still for a moment in the soft half-dark of his small London flat. The city outside was only just beginning to stir. A bus rolled by on the main road, the low sound reaching his window. A pigeon cooed on the sill. It felt like any other peaceful day, and yet in his mind the same thought repeated as always: anything could happen. Daniel sat up, swung his legs out of bed, and picked up his watch from the bedside table. He checked the time, then checked it again out of habit. Everything in his life was timed, measured, and planned. He liked it that way. Routine kept people safe. He moved through his morning tasks with quiet care. He shaved, made coffee, and toasted 2 slices of bread. While he ate, he watched a small news report on his phone with the sound low. There was talk of traffic, of weather, of some small political story that did not concern him. None of it mattered as much as his own schedule for the day. Today, he was on special child detail duty. Today, he would be watching over Prince George. Even though he had done this many times before, Daniel never allowed himself to relax. Protecting any member of the royal family was an honor, but a child was different. A child was curious. A child liked to wander, to ask questions, to get distracted by flowers, birds, and shiny stones on the ground. A child deserved to feel free and safe at the same time. His job was to make that possible. He finished his coffee, cleaned the cup, and straightened his already tidy kitchen. Then he took a quiet breath, as if placing a calm shield around his thoughts, and left for work. The drive to Kensington Palace was familiar. As he passed through the busy streets, he noticed details that most drivers would never see. A cyclist who rode too close to a parked car, a delivery van blocking half a lane, a taxi driver glancing down at his phone at a light. None of these things were problems for him personally, but his mind read each one, sorted it, and moved on. He saw the city in layers of movement and risk. When he reached the palace area, security checks were smooth and quick. The officers at the gate knew him well by now. He showed his ID, exchanged a short, professional greeting, and walked through the controlled entrance. The air inside the grounds felt different from the city outside. Quieter, more ordered, almost peaceful. He crossed the courtyard, passing stone walls and neat rows of windows that had seen generations of royal lives move behind them. Even after years on the job, he still felt a small sense of weight when he walked here. History lived in these buildings. Tradition lived in the way people stood, walked, and spoke. But with that history came a responsibility. No mistakes. Inside one of the secure sections, he stopped at a small planning room. A whiteboard on the wall showed the day's schedule in clean, neat writing. His name was listed next to Outdoor Walk Prince George. There were notes about times, locations, and backup plans. A map of the palace grounds and the nearby roads was pinned up on a board. Thick red lines marked main paths. Thinner blue lines marked alternative routes. Another guard, Mills, gave him a nod as he came in. "Morning, Hayes," he said. "Morning," Daniel replied, picking up a printed sheet with the updated schedule. "You're on the walk?" Mills asked, glancing at the paper. "Yes. Any changes?" "Some minor work near the usual side entrance," Mills answered. "Maintenance. They shifted the route slightly. It's all on the sheet." Daniel's eyes moved over the page. There it was, a small note about construction near one of the side gates. The walk would now pass a slightly different section of the gardens and use a different side exit if needed. It did not look like a major change. Still, he traced the path in his mind from start to finish, thinking about where the child would be at each moment. "Understood," he said. He went through his final checks before the detail began. Radio in place and tested, earpiece working, phone secured, belt neat, jacket buttoned but not too tight so he could move if he needed to. He glanced at his reflection in a small mirror. Short hair, calm eyes, no sign of nerves. That was important. Children could sense fear and so could adults. He needed to be a steady presence. When the time came, he walked out toward the gardens. The palace grounds stretched out around him, green and carefully kept. Tall trees lined parts of the paths, their leaves moving gently in the light breeze. A few staff members walked by, talking quietly. Somewhere a gardener pushed a wheelbarrow, the small squeak of its wheel mixing with the distant sounds of the city. He arrived near the place where the walk would start and took his position. Beside him, another guard, Harper, adjusted his own earpiece. A nanny stood a short distance away, checking something in a small bag, probably a snack, tissues, maybe a toy. She looked calm, used to this routine, but Daniel knew she depended on them more than she would ever say. "Everything all right?" she asked politely as she looked up. "Yes, ma'am," Daniel replied. "We'll keep the walk smooth and short. Usual path with the new adjustment near the side gate. We'll stay clear of the work area." "Very good," she said, satisfied. A few moments later, he heard light footsteps and cheerful voices. Prince George appeared from one of the palace doors, escorted by another staff member, his face bright with curiosity. He wore a neat little outfit, but there was still something very ordinary about him. The way his hair did not sit perfectly, the way his eyes moved quickly from one thing to another, taking in every detail. Daniel felt that familiar shift inside himself when he saw the child. It was like his awareness became even sharper, as if all the edges of the world came into focus at once. "Good morning, Your Royal Highness," Daniel said with a slight bow of his head. George gave a shy little smile and a small nod, then looked past Daniel at the gardens. "Are we going to the pond today?" the boy asked the nanny. "Not today, sweetheart," she replied gently. "Just a nice walk near the side gardens." George accepted this easily, already distracted by a bird hopping along the edge of the path. Daniel watched him, not with the eyes of a friend or family member, but with a careful, trained gaze. He checked how close the child was to each edge of the path, how far he was from the gate, how the sunlight might affect visibility for drivers on the nearby road outside the walls. Every little thing mattered. They set off along the path. Harper walked a few steps ahead, scanning the area in front of them. Daniel walked just behind and to the side of Prince George, close enough to reach him quickly if needed, but not so close that it felt suffocating. The nanny walked on the boy's other side, chatting with him softly. The gardens were calm. Sunlight fell in gentle patterns through the trees. The grass was a rich green, still dewy in some shaded spots. A gardener in the distance paused his work to stand respectfully while the small group passed, then quietly went back to trimming a hedge. Birds flew from branch to branch. Somewhere, a bell chimed the hour. To anyone watching from a window, it would have looked like a simple, pleasant walk. A child, a nanny, and a couple of guards in the background. That was the goal. To make danger look distant. To make safety look simple. But inside Daniel's mind, it was the opposite of simple. As they moved, he noted everything. An open gate to the left, quickly closed by staff as they approached. A delivery van parked near one of the service entrances, driver visible, doors shut. A cyclist passing on the road outside the fences, following the flow of traffic. Nothing seemed wrong, but he did not relax. When they reached a bend in the path, George slowed down to watch a squirrel that had stopped near a tree trunk. The animal looked at the group for a moment, then dashed up the bark and disappeared into the leaves. "Did you see that?" George asked, turning to the nanny. "I did," she smiled. "Very fast, wasn't it?" Daniel allowed himself the smallest smile, too. He liked these small, quiet moments. They reminded him why the work mattered. The prince's life, for now, was made of simple joys like squirrels and birds and walks in the sun. It was his job to make sure it stayed that way. They continued toward the side of the grounds where the route had been changed. This area was a little closer to one of the palace's side gates. which led eventually toward a place where vehicles could enter and exit. High fences and controlled access kept the public far away from this part, but the road beyond the boundary wall was still a real city road, with real traffic. As they approached that area, Daniel's ears picked up the sounds beyond the gardens, the low hum of engines, the distant stop-and-go rhythm of cars at a nearby junction. The thick wall and trees softened the noise, but they did not block it completely. Daniel's radio crackled softly in his ear. A voice from the control room reported that all was clear on the planned route. No unusual activity on the perimeter cameras, the voice said. Construction team present near Gate 3 as scheduled. Copy, Daniel answered in a low voice, careful not to alarm the child or the nanny. Proceeding as planned. The group reached a stretch of path that ran parallel to the boundary wall. On the other side of the wall was a road that many drivers used to cut between larger, busier streets. There was nothing strange about it. Still, Daniel's attention sharpened. He listened more closely to the pattern of traffic. Slow, steady, brakes now and then. The occasional honk. George walked a little ahead now, still between the two guards and the nanny, looking up at the tops of the trees. The leaves look like hands, he said, waving his own small hand in the air. That's a nice thought, the nanny replied, smiling. Tree hands. Daniel's eyes moved from the boy to the path, to the wall, to the nearby side gate. A short distance away, he could see part of the new construction area. Workers in bright vests were setting up equipment, staying inside a clearly marked zone. A temporary barrier separated them from the main path. One of the workers glanced over, saw the small group, and quickly looked away again, respectful and careful not to stare. Daniel checked their positions. Harper was still in front, scanning. The nanny was close and alert, even while she spoke kindly. The child was relaxed, his attention floating from tree to flower to stone. The air felt pleasant, with a soft wind that carried the smell of grass and distant city fumes mixed together. A bird called from somewhere high in the branches. Daniel noticed how the sound of an approaching car outside the wall rose and then fell as it passed by. Each vehicle was just a rushing noise beyond the stone, predictable and brief. As they walked, a small logistical detail came back to his mind. Because of the maintenance work near the usual side entrance, the group might need to use a slightly different gate if they exited later. It was a small thing, but any change in routine deserved extra attention. Different angles, different lines of sight, different distances to cover if he had to move quickly. He glanced at his watch, noting how long they had been outside. The schedule allowed for a limited time in the gardens. Too long, and attention might build outside the palace, in the form of photographers or curious people hoping to catch a glimpse. Inside the grounds, however, everything still felt controlled. George stopped to look at a flower bed filled with bright blooms. "These are new," he said, pointing. "They are," the nanny answered. "They were planted not long ago." Daniel took in the scene, the prince leaning slightly forward, shoes just at the edge of the path, the nanny standing beside him, Harper holding his place a few steps ahead, the path behind them open and clear. It was almost too perfect a picture of calm. But Daniel's mind never stopped turning. He thought of alternate routes if they needed to head back to the palace door sooner. He thought of the quickest way to move the child to cover if there was an issue. He thought of how one small change, a gate, a car, a person walking too close to the wall, could shift the balance of the day. In that moment, though, there was no clear problem. Just a watchful man, a young prince, a peaceful garden, and a routine day that seemed, to most people, completely safe. Daniel let the group move on, his steps quiet, his senses open. The world around them looked calm and kind, but his training taught him that calm could change without warning. And so he remained ready, even when the sun shone gently and the child laughed at squirrels and flowers, as if the day would be simple from start to finish. As they moved farther along the path, The calm of the garden stayed the same, but something in Daniel's mind began to feel slightly different. It was not a clear thought yet, more like a quiet feeling in the background, as if a tiny bell had started to ring far away. The air still felt gentle, the sunlight still soft, but he had been in his line of work long enough to know that danger did not always arrive with loud signs. Sometimes it began as nothing more than a small change in the rhythm of an ordinary day. Prince George skipped a little ahead, still within the safe space between the two guards and the nanny. He was talking about a story he had heard, mixing real things with imagination the way children often do. The nanny listened with a kind smile, adding a few words now and then but mostly letting him enjoy his own ideas. To anyone watching, it would have looked like a postcard moment. A young boy, a peaceful walk, adults calmly watching over him. Beyond the garden wall, the noise of the city went on, unseen but clearly heard. Cars moved along the road, their engines creating a steady background sound. Most of the time, this sound did not bother Daniel. In fact, he liked it. The regular rise and fall of engines, the predictable rhythm of traffic, made it easy for him to notice when something was off. It was like listening to music. Once he knew the normal tune, any wrong note stood out. As they passed a line of tall bushes, he heard it, a sharper, higher sound under the usual low hum. It was the sound of an engine being pushed harder than usual on a city street. The car was not at the wall yet. He could tell by how faint the noise was. But the tone of that engine told him the driver was moving with more force and less care than the others. His eyes shifted, even though he could not see the road directly through the stone wall. He did not stop walking. His hands did not move toward his radio yet. He simply listened, counting the beats of the sound in his mind. The car engine rose in pitch and then stayed at that higher level, instead of softening near what he knew was a slower part of the road. The nanny and George did not notice anything. Why would they? For them, the noise of the city was just part of the background of life. George bent to look at a line of ants marching near the edge of the path. He seemed more interested in how the ants worked together than in any sound from outside. "Look," he said, pointing. "They are carrying something." "Yes, they are very strong for their size," the nanny replied, leaning down with him. "They help each other." Harper, walking ahead, looked around the gardens, checking corners and open spaces. Daniel's attention, however, was split now between the garden and the unseen road. The strange engine sound grew louder for a moment, then faded slightly, then rose again. It felt impatient, like someone tapping their fingers too quickly on a table. Daniel slid his thumb over the small push-to-talk button on his radio, but did not press it just yet. He preferred to have something more concrete to report. His training had taught him not to trouble the control room with every small thing, but his instincts were not quiet. They spoke to him in silent words. "Pay attention to that. Do not dismiss it." The group reached a gentle curve in the path. From here, Daniel could see part of the side gate through gaps in the trees and shrubs. It was not wide open, just slightly in view, with metal bars and a secure locking system. Past the gate and beyond another section of wall lay the road. He glanced at the gate, then at the nanny, then at the boy. George had taken a few quick steps toward a patch of flowers that grew near a stone bench. His shoes made soft sounds on the path. Daniel shortened the distance between himself and the child by just a half step, so he could reach him more easily if he needed to. It was a small adjustment, barely noticeable, but it made him feel more ready. His radio gave a soft, routine crackle as someone in the control room updated another unit about a delivery arrival. Everything inside the palace grounds was still running smoothly. Daniel, however, was thinking increasingly about the world just beyond the walls. He heard that engine again, now a little louder, no longer a faint line in the distance. It sounded like a car moving faster than the others and changing gears with more force. In his mind, he pictured the road layout. A small junction, a zebra crossing, and a section where cars were expected to slow due to a nearby side entrance. Over the years, he had walked the boundary enough times to know how the sound of a normal car should behave as it passed each point. This one did not sound normal. He pressed the radio button now, keeping his voice calm and low. "Control, this is Hayes on Garden Walk," he said. Hearing a vehicle approaching the side road at higher speed than usual, requesting visual check on cameras facing Gate 3 and adjacent road. There was a short pause, then a reply came through his earpiece. "Copy, Hayes. Checking now." The nanny glanced at him for a brief second, noticing his slight change in tone, but his face remained steady. He gave her a small, reassuring nod. She seemed to accept that everything was still under control and turned her attention back to George, who was now gently touching a flower petal with one finger. On the road outside, a horn sounded, short and sharp. It was not an angry sound, more like a quick warning between drivers. Still, every such detail built another small stone in the structure forming in Daniel's mind. He felt the shape of a possible problem, though he could not yet see it. "Hayes, control here," the voice came back. Cameras show general traffic moving normally. One dark-colored vehicle approaching the junction, a bit quicker than others but still within lane. No clear sign of a problem yet. "Understood," Daniel replied. "Keep an eye on that vehicle, please." "Will do." He did not feel foolish for calling it in. He would have felt worse if he had stayed silent. His job was not to wait for clear proof of danger before acting. His job was to notice small details before they turned into big ones. The group continued their walk. The path now led them closer to the side of the grounds where, due to the earlier change in plan, they might exit if needed. Ahead, he could see a section where the trees thinned and the wall ran nearer to the path. Just beyond that, though still hidden, lay the road with its flowing cars. George walked along the edge of the path again, now using his foot to gently push a small stone forward, step by step, as if playing his own quiet game. The nanny watched him with a mix of fondness and focus, ready to remind him not to wander too close to the flower beds. Daniel listened. A car passed, its engine sound rising and then falling in the usual way. Another car passed, slower, almost soothing to his ears. Then came that higher, stronger sound again, clearer now, as if it had drawn nearer to the palace side. He looked toward the direction of the unseen road, his eyes narrowing slightly. He could tell by the pitch and length of the sound that the car had not slowed in the way it should have near the junction. Maybe the driver was in a hurry. Maybe they were late for something. Or maybe they simply did not care about speed limits. Whatever the reason, the effect was the same. Less time to react if anything unexpected happened. His radio crackled again. "Hayes, control. That dark vehicle we mentioned has just moved through the junction. Quick lane change." Still no direct threat, but driver is not slowing much. "We'll keep tracking." "Thank you. Keep me informed," Daniel answered. George suddenly spotted a butterfly fluttering near a hedge and turned excitedly. "Look," he said, raising his arm as if he could somehow catch the air around it. The butterfly danced out of reach, rising and falling in lazy loops. The child laughed and followed its path with his eyes. For a moment, his attention was completely fixed on it. Daniel's attention, however, was split between the butterfly and the buzzing worry in his own mind. It was like he was holding two different worlds at once: the playful, bright world of a young boy enjoying a garden, and the unseen, unpredictable world of a city road with an impatient driver. He gently shifted again, moving just a bit closer to George while trying not to interrupt the boy's joy. A good guard knew how to protect without turning life into a cage. The prince deserved to point at butterflies without feeling the weight of danger in every step. The side gate was now in clearer view. Near it, a different detail caught Daniel's eye. A delivery van he had seen earlier was making a controlled approach toward a service entrance. Security staff were handling it with their usual routine, checking IDs, matching plates with the schedule, making sure nothing was out of order. Near those staff members, a small group of workers in bright vests adjusted some cones and a short, portable barrier near the maintenance area. None of this looked wrong by itself. But he also noticed that one section of the road outside lined up almost directly with a short gap in the trees near the gate. That gap created a thin line of sight, and more importantly, a possible path of motion if something went off track. He thought again about the sound of that fast car. He did not like the way these details were beginning to connect in his mind. It was still only a pattern of maybes, but his job lived in exactly these patterns. He spoke into his radio again, keeping his voice smooth. "Control, confirm status of any movable barriers near Gate 3, he asked, particularly anything that might be temporarily lowered for deliveries. "Checking," came the reply. There was a brief pause with faint keyboard sounds in the background. "Hayes, we show one rising bollard near Gate 3 that will be used for delivery clearance within the next 10 minutes. It is currently raised. It will be lowered for the scheduled van once final checks are done." Daniel looked toward the service area. He saw the delivery van waiting, the driver talking with a security staff member. He imagined the sequence: barrier lowered, van allowed in, barrier raised. It usually went very smoothly, but now he added that sequence to the mental picture of the speeding car. "Understood," he said quietly. "Please delay lowering that bollard until after this garden walk has passed the nearby area. Confirm." There was another pause, then the calm voice replied, "Copy, Hayes. We can hold the bollard for a few extra minutes. Delivery can wait." "Thank you," Daniel said, feeling a small piece of relief settle in his chest. It did not remove all his concern, but it bought him a little time and space. The nanny, noticing his radio conversation, spoke softly. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "Just a small change in the timing of a delivery. Nothing for you to worry about. Please continue as normal." She nodded, reassured by his steady tone. She turned back to George, who was now stepping carefully on the shadow lines of the trees, pretending they were narrow bridges. "Only on the shadows," George said happily. "Not on the light." "That's a fun game," the nanny replied, playing along. The sound from the road outside came again, sharper now, as if the car was closer to the section near the palace. This time, Daniel could hear an extra detail: the soft squeal of tires turning quickly. It was not loud enough to mean loss of control, but it did mean haste. He concentrated, letting his other senses stay aware of the garden while his ears studied the pattern outside. He imagined the car weaving between slower vehicles, moving just a bit too fast, maybe rushing to beat a light or to turn before another car. He did not know the driver's thoughts, but he understood the risk that came with that movement. "Control," he said into his radio again, "do we have registration details on that dark vehicle yet?" "Yes, Hayes," came the answer. "Camera picked it up. We are running a basic check now. So far, just a regular private vehicle, no special flags. Passing along the road in the direction of the park area. Keep tracking it until it's clear of our side," he replied. "Advise if it slows, stops, or changes direction near any palace-adjacent point." "Will do." He could feel the shape of the moment becoming more tense, even if nothing had fully happened yet. This, he knew, was the space where a lot of protection work took place, in the gap between "everything is fine" and "something went wrong." It was the space of careful watching and quiet adjustments. He looked back at Harper, catching the other guard's eye for a second. With a small, almost invisible gesture of his hand, he signaled for Harper to tighten their formation slightly. Harper understood. He shifted his position so that the angle between him, George, and the gate gave them better coverage if they needed to move quickly. The nanny did not seem to notice the silent exchange, which was exactly how it should be. The child certainly did not. George was busy counting how many steps it took to move from one tree's shadow to the next, his voice soft and rhythmic as he whispered the numbers to himself. In the background, the engine sound rose again. Daniel's shoulders remained relaxed, but inside he was fully alert now, every sense tuned to the environment. The calm garden felt like a calm stage waiting for something unscripted to appear at its edge. He could not see the car yet, not from where he stood, but he knew it was there, somewhere beyond the wall, moving quickly, not slowing as much as it should. He did not know if it would pass by without any issue, or if the series of small details he had noticed were leading toward a real incident. What he did know, with complete certainty, was that he had to be ready for either outcome. So he walked on with the group, eyes sharp, ears open, mind steady, listening for the next small sign that would tell him whether this was just another ordinary day or the start of something else. The garden still looked peaceful. Sunlight still touched the tops of the trees. Prince George still played his little shadow game, carefully stepping only where the tree shade fell on the path. To anyone watching from a distance, nothing seemed wrong. But inside Daniel's mind, the quiet bell that had started ringing earlier was now much louder. He heard the sound of that car again, stronger and closer now. It rose over the other traffic like one sharp note over a soft background. He could tell without seeing it that the driver had not slowed down much. The engine was steady and firm, like someone pressing their foot hard on the pedal and not taking it off. "Control," he said into his radio, keeping his voice as calm as he could. "Update on that dark vehicle's position." There was a brief pause. He pictured someone in the control room looking at screens, checking cameras around the perimeter. "Hayes," came the reply. "Vehicle is now passing the park junction. Speed still a bit high. Lane change again. It's moving toward the section of road adjacent to your area, near Gate 3. "Understood," Daniel replied quietly. He looked ahead. The side of the garden where they were walking now curved gently toward the area near Gate 3. Between the trees, he could see more of the wall and a little more of the side gate. On the other side of that gate lay the city road where the car was moving. A soft breeze moved through the leaves overhead. Shadows shifted on the ground. George stopped again to look at a bird on the grass, then laughed when it hopped away from him. His laugh rang out bright and clear in the warm air. Daniel's eyes moved from the boy to the wall and back again. His step stayed slow and steady, matching the gentle pace of the group, but his thoughts were racing. He knew that most of the time, cars like this just passed by and nothing happened. Maybe the driver was late for work. Maybe someone was rushing to a meeting. Maybe they would slow down at the last moment, like people often did. But most of the time was not enough for him. His work was about the rare times when things did not go as they should. "Control," he said softly into the radio again. "Confirm that bollard near Gate 3 is still raised." Another pause. "Yes, Hayes, bollard is still up," the voice answered. "Delivery van is waiting. Staff will open for it soon, but we're holding as requested." He nodded, even though no one could see the gesture over the radio. Holding the bollard gave them a layer of safety. It meant that even if a car outside the wall behaved badly, it would meet a solid barrier instead of an open gap. Prince George pointed up at the sky. "Look at that cloud," he said. "It looks like a boat." "It does," the nanny replied, following his gaze. "Maybe it's sailing across the sky." George smiled and kept walking, his small shoes tapping lightly on the path. Harper up ahead scanned the open garden with the calm habit of experience. He did not seem worried, though he trusted Daniel's instincts enough to stay a little more alert when he sensed a change in his colleague's mood. They were now about halfway along the stretch of path that ran closest to the road. Through the gaps in the trees, Daniel saw brief flashes of the street outside. The roof of a bus, the top of a small car, the pale glint of sunlight on a passing vehicle. The sounds matched what he saw. Mostly it was ordinary, cars slowing and speeding up, brakes now and then, a gentle, steady flow. Then he heard it, the stronger engine sound, louder now, much nearer. It did not rise and fall like the others. It came forward fast, smooth and unbroken, like a line drawn across a page without pause. In the same moment his radio crackled. "Haze, control. That dark vehicle is now approaching the stretch parallel to your location. Speed is higher than recommended. Driver is not slowing near the zebra crossing." Daniel's heart gave a single heavy beat, but outwardly he stayed controlled. "Copy," he said. "Keep eyes on it." He could almost picture the scene beyond the wall. The car moving too quickly past the painted lines on the road, maybe ignoring a sign telling drivers to slow near the palace side. Other cars would be easing off their speed, but this one kept going. The nanny adjusted her hold on the small bag in her hand. She did not seem to suspect anything yet. George had found something else to think about, a line of stones at the edge of the path. He began stepping from one to another as if they were a game board. For a brief moment, the noise of the car dipped as it moved between other vehicles. Then it returned, clearer than before. There was a faint squeal of tires again, not loud enough to mean complete loss of control, but sharp enough to make Daniel's attention tighten even more. He moved half a step closer to George. It was a tiny adjustment, but in his mind it meant he could reach him in less than a second. "Harper," he called softly, without using the radio, tighten formation. Harper glanced back and nodded, moving closer to the front right side of the group. Together, their positions now formed a triangle around the prince and the nanny, with enough space to move but not so much that anyone could slip through easily. Another voice crackled through the radio, this time from the security team near the gate. "Control, Gate 3 here. Delivery van cleared. Requesting permission to lower bollard now for entry." Daniel's eyes snapped toward the service area as much as the trees allowed. He could not see the bollard from where he stood, but he knew exactly where it was and what could happen if it lowered at the wrong moment. He pressed the radio button quickly. "Gate 3, hold bollard," he said, a little more firmly than before. "Repeat, hold bollard. Fast-moving vehicle currently on adjacent road. Do not lower until I give clear." There was a pause that felt far too long. Then the reply came, a bit uncertain. Gate 3 here, copy Hayes. We have already started the lowering process. Bollard is moving down now. It will be fully lowered in a few seconds. Should we raise it again after the van passes?" Daniel felt a small, cold knot in his chest. They had already started. For a short window of time, the barrier would not be fully up or fully down. It would be in motion. And during that motion, the road and the gate area would be at their weakest point. "Control," he said quickly, "confirm position of that dark vehicle right now." The answer came in a rushed tone. "Hayes, vehicle is now entering the section parallel to Gate 3. Speed still high. It just passed another car on the right. We see brake lights flicker but no real slowdown yet." He could feel it now, the different pieces lining up faster than he liked. A fast car, a shared stretch of road, a bollard in motion, a child walking close to a part of the garden that ran near that gate. The noises from outside grew louder and more focused. The sound of the car's engine carried through the air, no longer just a part of the background. Daniel could tell it was almost level with their position now, maybe just a bit behind them, traveling in the same direction as their path. George took another playful hop from one stone to the next, landing near the outer edge of the path. His small shoe landed close to the low stone border that separated the path from a narrow strip of grass that ran along the inner side of the wall. "Stay on the path, please, Your Royal Highness," the nanny said gently. "Don't go into the grass." George obeyed, stepping back onto the path, still cheerful and unaware. Daniel's mind ran through a quick chain of thoughts. If the car lost control, where could it go? The wall was solid, but the gate area was more open. If the car hit the curb, it could angle toward that opening. If the bollard was down and the outer security barrier not fully in place, the car could slide or skid near that gap. Even if it never broke through the gate, the shock and danger could still be serious. He spoke into the radio again, his voice low but more urgent. All units near Gate 3 be prepared for possible fast-moving vehicle. This may be a simple traffic error, but we treat it as a risk. Repeat, treat as a risk. Copy, came a reply from one of the outer guards. The garden ahead narrowed slightly as they approached a point where the path passed closer to the wall. From here, Daniel could see a little more of the outside world through the slim spaces between the tree branches. He saw the tops of more cars. He saw the faint shape of a bus moving slowly along. And then, for just a second he saw it, the dark car. It moved into view between two gaps in the leaves, just enough for him to catch a glimpse of its roof and part of its windshield. Even in that short look, he could tell the car was not gliding like the others. It seemed to jerk slightly as it changed lane, then swing back the other way, as if the driver was trying to fit into shrinking spaces. In that same moment, another sound reached him, the squeal of tires in a sharper, longer note. This time, it was not a small sound. It carried clearly over the wall, making George pause mid-step and glance up. "What was that?" the boy asked, his voice curious but not scared yet. "Probably just a car braking a bit hard on the road," the nanny answered, trying to keep things light. Daniel's heart beat faster now, though he kept his face calm. He listened. The engine roared, there was another screech, and he heard a faint honk from another driver. In his mind, he could see the car pushing past the safe line, perhaps trying to overtake another vehicle before the road narrowed. "Control," he said again. "Is the vehicle still moving straight or changing course?" "It just swerved slightly," the control room voice replied. "It is now closer to the curb on the palace side. Brake lights are on and off. Driver may be trying to slow, but speed is still high." The words came quickly, one after another, and with each one Daniel's sense of danger increased. He knew that when drivers pushed their speed and then realized too late that they needed to slow, they often reacted in sudden, uneven ways. That was when mistakes happened. He looked down at George, then at the nanny, then at the line of the path ahead. They were getting nearer to a point where, if something went wrong outside, they might be closer than he would like to the possible line of trouble. Without making it obvious, he moved even closer to the child, placing himself slightly between George and the wall. "Your Royal Highness," he said gently, "let's walk right here next to me for a bit, please." George did not argue. He simply nodded and shifted his steps to stay closer to Daniel, still looking around with open curiosity. The nanny noticed the change but did not question it. She trusted that if Daniel made a change, there was a reason. His radio crackled again, this time with overlapping voices. The control room and one of the guards near the gate spoke at almost the same time. "Hayes, vehicle is now very close to Gate 3 sector. Gate 3 here, bollard is fully lowered now, van preparing to move forward." Daniel's mind clicked through the picture in an instant. A fast car, close to the gate. A bollard down. A delivery van preparing to move. A possible opening, however small, at exactly the wrong time. He felt the air around him change. It was still warm and bright, but to him it now seemed tight, like the seconds themselves had stiffened. Every sound felt louder. Every movement felt sharper. He lifted his radio again and spoke in a tone that left no room for delay. "Stop all vehicle movement near Gate 3 now," he said. "Hold the van, hold everything. We have a high-risk vehicle passing at speed." "Copy," came the hurried reply from the gate team. "Van is stopping. Van is stopping." He could hear, even from the garden, the faint hiss of brakes from that van, and the low clunk of something in motion, probably the bollard's mechanism locking in place. Then, almost at the same time, he heard the loudest sound yet from the road, a long, sharp cry of tires gripping and sliding. It was the kind of sound that made people on the street turn their heads and draw in a breath. The noise made George jump slightly. His small hand twitched as if he wanted to grab something. The nanny's eyes widened and she instinctively reached out toward him, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice a little tight now, looking at Daniel. Daniel did not answer her question directly. There was no time for explanations. Every part of him was focused on listening and judging the exact moment when he might need to move. "Control," he said, his voice quiet but strong. "Report." "Hayes," the voice came back in a rush. "Vehicle has just braked hard near the palace side. It's skidding slightly. It is veering a bit toward the curb and the area in front of Gate 3. We don't have full control on the driver's steering. Repeat, vehicle is skidding." The words seemed to hang in the air like a bright warning sign. In that instant, the calm of the garden and the danger on the road met in Daniel's mind as one picture. He understood that there was now a real chance that the car could slide toward the gate area, perhaps bouncing off the curb, perhaps pointing toward the opening where the bollard was still in motion or had only just locked. The group was close enough to that side of the grounds that any serious mistake by that driver could send noise, debris, or even part of the vehicle dangerously near where the prince was walking. Daniel did not see the car directly yet, but he did not need to. He trusted the control room's eyes and his own instincts. The situation had moved from maybe to almost. He felt his muscles tighten, not in fear but in readiness. This, he knew, was the moment where hesitation could cost precious seconds. He moved closer still to George, his body now forming a clear shield between the child and the wall. Harper adjusted immediately, moving to the other side to close the space. The nanny, sensing that something serious was happening, wrapped her hand around George's, gently but firmly. "Stay close to me, sweetheart," she said. George looked up at her, then at Daniel. He did not fully understand what was going on, but he could sense that the adults around him were no longer relaxed. His eyes grew a little more serious. Daniel's radio was still in his hand. He pressed the button one last time before he knew he would have to act with his body instead of his voice. "All units," he said, his tone clear and precise. "This is Hayes. Possible impact scenario near Gate 3. Move the package inward now." Repeat, "Move the package inward now." He released the button and turned his full attention to the physical world in front of him. The path, the prince, the nanny, the wall, the gate area just ahead. He heard the screech of tires reach its loudest point. He heard a horn. He heard the faint shouts of someone outside on the road. The sounds came together in a single, sharp wave that washed over the peaceful garden. Time seemed to narrow down to a thin line. Daniel could feel the next second arrive like a weight in the air. It was the second in which he would have to decide and move, faster than thought, guided by everything his training and instinct had taught him. His hands opened slightly, ready to reach. His body leaned just enough to prepare for a sudden step. His eyes locked on the child, then flicked toward the area where he knew the unseen car was skidding. The calm walk was over. The moment of danger had fully arrived, pressing at the edge of their quiet world. And Daniel was ready to act. The screech of tires rose high in the air, longer and louder, like a warning drawn across the road. It made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. In that same instant, through a thin gap between the trees and the metal bars of the side gate, he finally saw the dark car clearly. It was not a calm, steady car anymore. The front of the vehicle dipped slightly, as if the driver had pushed the brakes very late. The car swayed a little to one side, then tried to straighten again. It moved faster than it should have near a place like this. Daniel saw the front wheels twist, trying to find balance. He saw the small, sharp movements that told him the driver was no longer fully in control. He did not wait for more details. He did not stop to think in long sentences. All the training, all the drills, all the quiet planning in his mind became a single, clear action. Move the child. His body reacted before his thoughts could form full words. He stepped in front of Prince George and in one smooth motion, bent and lifted him up into his arms. It was not rough, but it was fast. The boy gave a soft, surprised gasp as his feet left the ground. At the same time, Daniel turned his body sideways, keeping his eyes on the direction of the gate while he shifted his weight. Years of practice made the movement fluid and sure. He held the prince close against his chest, one arm supporting the boy's back, the other arm under his legs, making sure he was secure. "Stay with me, sir," Daniel said firmly but gently, his voice close to the child's ear. George wrapped his arms around Daniel's neck without even thinking about it. Children often did that when they were lifted quickly. He did not fully understand what was happening, but he could feel the seriousness in the guard's voice and the strong, steady way he was being held. The nanny's eyes widened in surprise. "What?" she started, but she did not finish the sentence. Harper, the guard in front, saw Daniel's sudden movement and reacted at once. Without needing words, he understood that the situation had changed from watchful to urgent. He stepped sideways and back, placing his body between the group and the open view of the gate area, widening the shield around them. Daniel moved quickly toward a solid point of cover, a thick stone pillar that stood near a slight inward curve in the garden wall. He knew that if anything from the road came too close, noise, dust, or even loose pieces from a vehicle, this was a place that would break the line and give them extra safety. "Back!" Daniel called to the nanny and to Harper, his voice strong but controlled. "Move in behind the pillar." He did not shout in panic. His tone was clear, like a firm order in a training exercise, but the speed in his steps told everyone that this was very real. The nanny didn't hesitate now. She clutched her small bag to her side and hurried after them, trusting the guards completely. Harper stepped a little sideways as he moved, still keeping his body turned toward the more open side, ready to respond to anything else that might happen. As Daniel carried George toward the pillar, the sounds from the road swelled. The screech of tires continued for another second that felt much longer than it was. Then there was a heavy, low thump that echoed through the stone, as if something solid had met another hard surface. The ground under Daniel's feet seemed to shiver just once, a small tremor that ran through the earth. It was not enough to throw him off balance, but it told him that the car had finally come to a stop, and not a gentle one. He did not turn to look right away. Instead, he focused on reaching the pillar. When he got there, he moved around it so that he and the prince were on the inner side, with the thick stone between them and the gate area. He lowered himself slightly into a brace stance, making his body a firm support if the boy shifted or moved. "It's all right, sir," he said softly to the child. "I've got you. You're safe here." George was holding on tightly now, his small heart beat fast against Daniel's chest. His face was pressed partly into Daniel's shoulder, but one of his eyes peeked out, wide and uncertain. "Is it a car?" the boy asked in a small voice. "Yes," Daniel replied calmly. "A car stopped badly outside, but you are safe here in the garden with us." He wanted his words to be simple and steady, something the child could hold on to. Harper reached the pillar a second later and took up a position just on its outer edge, half covering the nanny with his body. His eyes were fixed on the gate area, watching for any further movement, any unexpected sign. The nanny stayed close, one hand still on George's arm even though Daniel was holding him now. Her face was pale, but she was trying her best to stay calm for the boy's sake. Behind the stone, Daniel could now hear details he hadn't been able to focus on while moving. The car's engine was no longer a smooth sound. It coughed unevenly, then settled into a rough idle before finally being turned off. There were voices outside, raised but not screaming, people talking fast, giving directions, asking if everyone was all right. His radio crackled in his ear again, loud in the sudden stillness of their small space of cover. "Hayes, control here," came the hurried voice. "Report status of the package." Daniel pressed the button on his radio, keeping one arm securely around George as he did so. "Package secure," he said clearly. "Repeat, package secure. We are behind cover near the pillar by the inner wall. No visible harm to the child or the nanny." There was a small breath of relief in the reply. "Copy, Hayes. Medical and outer units are moving to the vehicle now. Stay in place until we confirm the area is fully safe." "Understood," Daniel answered. He shifted his stance slightly so he could see past the pillar with one eye, without exposing himself or the child too much. Through that narrow line, he could make out a part of the gate. From this angle, he saw only a slice of the scene. A dark car sitting at an awkward angle near the outer barrier, a bit too close to the curb, and a few figures in high-visibility vests running toward it. The car had stopped short of the full inner area. The bollard and gate had done their jobs, and the security teams outside were already moving in. He did not stare long. His main task was not to study the car. It was to stay with the prince. He looked down at George again. The boy's breathing was still quick, but he seemed more curious than frightened now that the loudest noise had stopped. "Why did the car make that sound?" George asked, his voice shaky but brave. "The driver was not careful," Daniel said quietly, choosing his words with care. "They went too fast and had to stop very suddenly. When that happens, the tires can make a loud sound on the road. It is not pleasant, but it is over now." "Did it break?" George asked. "It stopped roughly," Daniel replied. "The people outside are checking everything. That is their job, just like my job is to stay with you." George nodded slowly, processing this. He loosened his hold just a little, enough to lean back slightly and look at Daniel's face. "You moved me very fast," he said. "Yes, sir," Daniel replied. "Sometimes we have to move quickly to stay safe. You did very well. You held on to me and stayed calm." The nanny let out a small breath when she heard this. She had been holding her worry inside, not wanting to upset the prince, but now a bit of that tension left her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, more to herself than anyone, though Daniel heard it. Harper glanced back at them for a moment and gave a short nod. His eyes showed the relief he did not put into words. Then he turned his attention outward again, keeping his focus on the gate and the path leading away from it. More voices came through Daniel's radio. Outer guards were reporting their positions. One of them mentioned that the driver of the car was being spoken to and checked. Another said that no one outside had serious harm, though they were still doing full checks. The control room repeated that there was no sign of any planned attack. It looked like reckless driving and poor control, but they would treat it with full care until every detail was known. "Hayes," the control voice said at last, "situation at the vehicle appears stable now. We will keep units out there until everything is cleared. For the moment, keep the package in place. We may bring you back along the inner route soon." "Copy," Daniel said. "We are steady here." He relaxed his shoulders by a small amount, but he did not let go of George yet. He knew that sometimes, after a sudden scare, children needed a little more time being held before they felt ready to stand on their own again. The garden around them slowly began to feel familiar again. The birds, which had gone silent during the loudest noise, began to make soft sounds in the trees. The wind moved gently through the leaves. A faint, distant sound of regular traffic returned beyond the wall, though now every engine seemed slower to Daniel's ears, as if the world had taken a breath and decided to be more careful. The nanny looked at the prince with concern and tenderness. "Are you all right, my dear?" she asked quietly. George nodded, though his face still showed lingering worry. "I didn't like the sound," he admitted. "Neither did we," she said softly. "But you were very brave, and Daniel was with you the whole time." The boy looked at Daniel again. There was something new in his gaze now, not just the simple trust of a child who is used to adults watching over him, but a deeper understanding that this man had made a quick choice to keep him safe. "Do you always listen like that?" George asked shyly. "To the cars and the sounds?" "Yes," Daniel said with a small smile. "That is part of my work. I pay attention so that you can enjoy your day without having to think about all of that." George was silent for a moment, then asked, "Were you scared?" Daniel considered the question. He wanted to answer honestly but also gently. "I was serious," he said. "I knew something might go wrong, so I focused very hard." When we focus and act quickly, we don't have much time to feel scared. We just do what needs to be done. The boy nodded slowly, as if filing that thought away in his young mind. Harper's radio gave a short burst of sound. "Harper Hayes, status check," someone asked. Harper responded first. "Harper here, positioned by inner pillar with Hayes. Area around us is calm, no issues on our side." Then Daniel added, "Hayes here, package calm and secure, awaiting instructions for movement." "Understood," came the reply. "Stand by for route decision." The nanny adjusted her grip on the bag again and looked out toward the gardens. "Will we be going back inside now?" she asked in a soft voice. "Most likely, yes," Daniel said. "They will want to bring him in by a safe path while they finish dealing with the situation outside. But we will wait for their word." As they stood there, a young officer from another part of the grounds approached slowly, hands visible, posture relaxed to avoid causing any alarm. He stopped at a respectful distance from the pillar. "Sergeant Hayes," he said quietly, "Control asked me to pass on a message in person as well. The outer team has everything contained. They will clear the road and speak with the driver at length. No serious harm reported. You are to bring the prince back inside along the inner garden route once you are ready. They would prefer you move at a calm walking pace so as not to worry him." "Thank you," Daniel replied. "We'll move shortly." The officer nodded and stepped back again, making sure not to crowd the small group. Daniel looked down at George once more. "How are you feeling now, sir?" he asked. "A bit better," George said. "Can I walk again?" "Yes," Daniel said, "but stay very close to me and Harper. We will go back inside now. The garden walk is finished for today." He gently lowered the prince back to the ground, keeping one hand on his shoulder for a moment to make sure he was steady. The boy's legs felt firm enough. He looked up at Daniel, then at the nanny, then at Harper. "Will the car still be there?" he asked. "Not on our side," Daniel replied. "We will walk the other way, along the safe path. You won't see it. The people whose job it is to look after the road will take care of it." "All right," George said softly. The group adjusted their positions again. This time, Daniel walked slightly ahead and to the side of the boy, close enough to reach him in an instant. Harper walked on the other side, forming a balanced, protective shape around the prince. The nanny remained just behind and to the side, where she could talk to him and comfort him without stepping into the guard's line. They stepped out from behind the pillar and back onto the path. The garden seemed almost like a different place now, not because it had changed, but because they had just been reminded that the quiet moments in it could be broken without warning. As they started walking back toward the main part of the palace, Daniel kept listening. The traffic sounds were settling back into a normal rhythm. The radios, while still active, were less rushed now. The workers near the maintenance area had paused their tasks, watching respectfully as the small group passed by. Some of them had expressions of concern on their faces, but they stayed in place and did not approach. One of the workers, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, caught Daniel's gaze for just a second and gave a small nod of respect. Daniel returned the nod without breaking his stride. The path curved away from the side gate and back into the heart of the gardens. The tall trees, the flower beds, the benches, all of it seemed to lean in around them, as if the garden itself was closing protective arms. George stayed close to Daniel, his usual playful steps a little more careful now, but his eyes were already starting to notice ordinary things again. A bird on a branch, a bright flower near the edge of the path, a patch of sunlight on the grass. As they walked, Daniel felt his own heartbeat slowly easing back from its fast rhythm. The sharp edge of the moment was passing. He knew there would be reports to give and questions to answer later. He knew the control room would want exact times, clear descriptions, and calm explanations. He was ready for that. But for now, his focus remained simple and present. Keep the prince safe, bring him back inside, and let this garden once again be just a place of trees, flowers, and quiet steps, instead of the scene of a narrow escape. He walked on, steady and alert, the memory of his quick action still fresh in his muscles, the weight of the boy's brief hold still warm on his shoulder. The danger had passed in a matter of seconds, but he understood that those seconds were the ones his whole job was built for. By the time the small group reached the palace entrance, the sharp edge of the moment had softened, but it had not disappeared. It hung quietly in the air, like the echo of a sound that had already ended. A member of the indoor staff was waiting at the door, having been told by radio that they were on their way back sooner than planned. She held the door open with a gentle, steady expression, trying not to show too much concern in front of the prince. "Welcome back," she said softly. The nanny gave her a small nod and stepped inside with George, who still walked close to Daniel. Harper followed, and Daniel came in last, letting his eyes sweep the courtyard one more time before the door closed behind them. It was a habit he had picked up over years, always take one last look. Inside, the air felt cooler. The familiar quiet of the palace wrapped around them. The hallway, with its polished floors and framed pictures, seemed unchanged, but to those who had just come from the garden, everything felt just a bit sharper, a bit more real. "Let's go to the sitting room for a moment," the nanny suggested gently. "We can have some water and rest." George nodded. "Can Daniel come too?" he asked without hesitation. Daniel glanced at the nanny, then at Harper. It was not always his place to remain with the family once the immediate duty was over, but today was not a usual day, and the staff seemed to understand that. "Yes, he'll stay nearby," the nanny replied, looking at Daniel as if to confirm. He gave a small nod. "Of course," he said. They walked together to a quiet sitting room that was often used for short breaks. It had large windows looking out over a different part of the grounds, soft chairs, and a small table with a jug of water and glasses already prepared. Someone in the staff had thought ahead. The nanny guided George to a comfortable seat and poured him some water. "Slow sips," she reminded him kindly. He took the glass with both hands and did as she said. His face was still thoughtful, but there was no panic there, only questions and the remains of surprise. Harper stayed near the door, his posture relaxed but alert. Daniel stood a few steps away, close enough to respond if needed, but not so close as to crowd the space. His radio was still in his ear. He could hear the low murmur of ongoing communication as the outer teams finished their work at the road. After a moment, the door opened again, and a senior palace official entered. He was a calm man with kind eyes and a precise way of speaking. He looked at George first, then at the nanny, then at Daniel. "Is everyone all right?" he asked. "Yes," the nanny said. "We were a bit shaken, but no one was harmed." The official smiled softly at the prince. "You did very well, sir," he said. "Sometimes loud and unexpected things happen in the world. It is normal to be surprised. What matters is that you are safe." George nodded, still holding his glass. "Daniel picked me up very fast," he said, as if sharing an important secret. The official's gaze shifted to Daniel, and something like quiet respect passed through his eyes. "I have heard," he said. "We will speak more later. For now, you should all rest for a moment." He did not stay long. There were calls to answer, reports to request, and many details to manage whenever anything unusual happened near the royal grounds. Before he left, he gave Daniel a small, meaningful nod that said, without words, "We saw what you did and we are grateful." After a few minutes, another member of staff arrived to gently lead the prince to a different room, where the day's plans would be adjusted to keep things calm and ordinary for him. The nanny went along, making sure he felt safe and cared for. George paused at the door and looked back at Daniel. "Thank you," he said simply. "You're very welcome, sir," Daniel replied. "That's what I'm here for." When they had gone, the room fell quiet. Harper let out a slow breath and ran a hand once through his hair. "Well," Harper said softly, "that was not in the usual schedule." "No," Daniel replied with a small, tired hint of humor in his voice. "Not quite." They shared a brief, understanding smile. It was the kind of smile that people who have just gone through something tense sometimes give each other, not because anything was funny, but because they were glad to be standing there, talking, with the danger behind them. A short time later, Daniel was called to a secure office where a small debriefing would take place. This was standard after any unusual event. He walked there along a quiet corridor, the same mind that had been so focused on tiny sounds now preparing itself to give clear, organized answers. In the office, a few people were gathered. The senior palace official from earlier, a representative from the Royal Protection Unit, and a person from the control room team. A screen on one wall showed a paused camera image of the outer road, the dark car at an angle, security staff nearby, barriers in place. "Sergeant Hayes," the senior official said as Daniel entered, "please have a seat." Daniel sat upright, hands resting calmly on his knees. "We want to go through what happened step by step," the protection unit representative said. "You understand this process?" "Yes, sir," Daniel replied. They asked him when he first noticed the unusual engine sound. He told them. They asked when he contacted control the first time. He gave the time as closely as he could remember and described the short conversation. They asked about the bollard, the delivery van, and the moment he realized that the timing of everything could create a risk. He answered all their questions in clear, simple words, without exaggeration. He spoke about patterns, about listening, about how the engine sound did not match the normal rhythm of traffic. He spoke about the decision to delay the lowering of the bollard, and then about the moment he learned that it was already moving. He described the car's movement as he saw it through the trees, the speed, the slight swaying, the sound of the tires. "And then?" the senior official asked. "And then," Daniel said, "it reached a point where waiting for more information would have cost time. The car was braking hard and skidding near the gate. The package was close enough to that area that, in my judgment, they needed to be moved inside and behind cover immediately." He described how he had picked up the prince, where he had carried him, and how he had chosen the stone pillar as the safest point nearby. He mentioned Harper's movements and the nanny's response. He explained that his primary thought was simple: put something solid between the child and the line of possible danger. The person from the control room nodded slowly as he listened. "Your radio tone changed right before you moved him," the man said. "We could hear it. That's when we knew you had made a final decision." The debriefing continued for a while longer. They compared Daniel's account with camera footage from outside. The car's path, the way it slid, the exact point at which it stopped. It turned out that the car had struck a curb and come to rest very near the barrier, but the combination of the raised bollard and the gate structure had prevented it from traveling any further in. The driver, they told him, appeared to be deeply embarrassed and shaken. Early reports suggested a mix of poor judgment and distraction, not an intention to cause harm. Still, officials and police would speak with the driver at length, and every part of the event would be reviewed carefully. At the end of the meeting, the senior official looked at Daniel with a thoughtful expression. "Sergeant Hayes," he said, "your reaction time from the moment the car entered the risk area to the moment you moved the prince is estimated at less than 2 seconds. During that time, you also gave clear radio instructions and ensured the nanny and your fellow guard had cover as well. That is not a small thing." "I was doing my job, sir," Daniel replied quietly. Yes, the official said, and you did it very well. There will be formal words about this later. For now, I will say this. Today could have gone very differently if not for your focus. The words settled in the room like a gentle weight. Daniel did not smile, but there was a quiet light in his eyes. He gave a short nod. Thank you, sir, he said. He was released from the meeting with the understanding that more questions might come in the days ahead. There would be paperwork, official notes, and possibly higher-level reviews. That was all normal. For the rest of the day, his schedule was adjusted. He stayed on duty, but was given lighter tasks around the palace interior, while the outer teams handled the remaining work at the road. When he passed other staff members in the halls, he noticed a few extra glances, some curious, some respectful. News traveled fast within the palace walls. By that evening, the story had begun to reach the outside world as well. News channels and websites picked up pieces of information. A car losing control near a royal entrance, a quick-acting guard, a child moved to safety in time. The details were not all accurate at first, as often happens when stories spread, but the central idea was clear. Someone had listened, watched, and reacted in a way that had protected a young member of the royal family. Headlines began to appear with phrases like quick-thinking royal guard and split-second action. Commentators spoke about training, discipline, and the daily work of protection officers that most people never see. Inside the palace, the tone remained calm and modest. There were no big celebrations, no loud praise. That was not the way things were done. But within the quieter circles of those who understood the work, there was a strong sense of appreciation. The next day, Daniel was called again to a private office. This time, the meeting was shorter and more personal. A senior figure in the royal household, someone whose words carried great weight, spoke to him directly. Sergeant Hayes, this person said, what happened yesterday has been reviewed at several levels. The family has been informed of your actions. They are grateful. Daniel listened quietly, hands behind his back in a respectful stance. In this line of work, the senior figure went on, we ask a great deal of our officers. We ask for attention, patience, and readiness, even when nothing appears to be happening. You showed all of those things. When the moment came, you did exactly what you were trained to do, and more. There will be a formal commendation recommended for you. Daniel felt a mix of humility and quiet pride. I am honored, sir, he said, truly, but I also know I was not alone. The control room, the gate team, Harper, the nanny, everyone played a part. And that is why this house continues to stand, the senior figure replied gently. Because many people do their part, and sometimes one of them must step forward in a very visible way. Yesterday, that was you. After the meeting, Daniel returned to his usual routine as much as possible. He knew that, for a while, people would look at him differently. Some would want to shake his hand. Others would simply nod in passing, saying nothing but meaning a lot. He accepted it, but he did not chase it. He believed that attention should never be the goal of this work. A few days later, when things around the palace had settled into their normal rhythm again, Daniel was once more assigned to a detail near the young prince. The weather was softer that day, with thin clouds across the sky. Plans were made for a shorter, more controlled time outside, with every measure double-checked. Before the walk began, Daniel waited in a familiar hallway. He adjusted his radio, tested his earpiece, and looked over a small printed sheet with the route and timings. His movements were the same as always. Routine was a comfort. The door nearby opened and Prince George stepped out with the nanny. When he saw Daniel, his face brightened. "Hello, Daniel," he said. "Good morning, sir," Daniel replied with a respectful nod. The boy hesitated for a moment, then said, "Mum told me what you did." Daniel's expression stayed steady, but his eyes softened. "I am glad she did," he said, "but I promise you it is simply my job to watch and be ready. That is what all of us here do for you and your family." George thought about this for a moment, then held out something he had been carrying. It was a small piece of paper, folded once. On it, drawn in the careful lines of a child's hand, was a simple picture: a tall figure, a smaller figure next to him, and a big rectangle that might have been a building or a wall. Above them was a bright, round sun. "This is you and me," George explained shyly. "In the garden. I wanted you to have it." For a second, Daniel did not know what to say. He was used to formal thanks, structured praise, and official words. But this small, slightly uneven drawing felt like something else entirely, something pure and personal. "Thank you, sir," he said softly, accepting the paper with great care as if it were something fragile. "I will keep it safe." "Like you kept me safe," the boy said simply. The nanny smiled, and even Harper, standing a little farther down the hall, allowed himself a quiet grin at the exchange. The walk that day was peaceful. The traffic beyond the wall moved at its usual, slow rhythm. The garden looked calm and kind again. Birds sang in the trees. George played, asked questions, and pointed at flowers as children do. The guards walked, watched, and listened as they always did. Daniel's ears still measured the sounds of engines. His eyes still tracked every small change in the environment. His mind still imagined paths of risk and routes of safety. But now, he did so with the folded piece of paper tucked carefully in an inner pocket, close to his chest. That night, when he returned to his small flat, he placed the drawing in a simple frame and set it on a shelf near the window. Outside, the city lights glowed softly. Cars moved along the streets, their engines rising and falling in familiar patterns. He sat in his chair for a while, looking at the drawing and thinking about the day in the garden, the sharp sound of tires, the quick decision, and the small arms that had wrapped around his neck when he lifted the prince away from danger. He did not think of himself as a hero. He thought of himself as a man who had been given a task and had tried his best to honor it. Yet he could not deny that something had changed inside him. The work felt the same, but the meaning of it shimmered a little more clearly now. In the quiet of his flat, he allowed himself one long, slow breath of gratitude. Gratitude that the child was safe, that the worst had not happened, and that his training had guided him when the world suddenly demanded more than an ordinary step. Outside, the city continued its endless movement. Inside, a small drawing of two simple figures in a garden reminded him why every morning he woke up before his alarm, checked his watch twice, and treated every day as if anything could happen. Because sometimes, in just a few seconds, anything almost did, and on that day he had been ready.